France is often seen as a land of romance, rich culture, and effortless sophistication. But what if that image is just an illusion? Beneath the postcard-perfect exterior, the country faces a perfect storm of political instability, economic challenges, and social fractures. Stay tuned as we pull back the curtain on what's really happening in France today. The political breakdown, how France's leadership gridlock impacts daily life. After the 2024 legislative elections, France found itself in a state of political deadlock. The elections resulted in a hung parliament, meaning no single party could command a majority. While debates often flare up in democracies, the situation in France plunged attempts at governance into chaos. At the heart of this gridlock was the inability to form a stable coalition, leading to months of stalled decision-making. Laws that were once expected to pass quickly became bargaining chips in endless negotiations. For the average citizen, this might seem like a distant issue that plays out in conference rooms and the halls of power. But its impact on daily life has been far-reaching. One of the most alarming outcomes has been the government's inability to address the urgent reforms the country desperately needs. From ballooning public debt to soaring unemployment rates, the state of France's economy has been left vulnerable. Essential decisions to tackle inflation, for instance, are delayed because lawmakers can't move beyond internal conflicts. In 2026, a controversial budget proposal was introduced aiming to impose tax hikes while dramatically cutting public spending. This move triggered outrage from several groups, especially those already struggling with financial hardships. Public demonstrations became commonplace, with citizens taking to the streets to voice their frustration over policies they perceived as tone-deaf. The question many people asked was how a government mired in its own dysfunction could possibly help households on the brink. France is no stranger to protests, but in recent years, these demonstrations have intensified, fueled partly by growing distrust in political institutions. Citizens feel disconnected from leaders who have failed to present solutions for the worsening economic situation. Strikes erupted in multiple sectors, from transportation and healthcare to education, severely disrupting daily routines. For instance, public transport workers staged walkouts for days on end, leaving commuters stranded. Teachers and hospital staff, overstretched and underpaid, also joined the wave of resistance, calling attention to a system they say no longer serves the people. The ripple effects of this deadlock extend far beyond headlines about Parliament. Take, for example, small business owners. Many find themselves in a bind as inflation drives up costs while customer purchasing power dwindles. Without adequate government intervention to stimulate the economy, these entrepreneurs are left to fend for themselves. Similarly, parents balancing bills and groceries have been forced to make choices they never expected, like skipping utility payments to ensure their kids are fed. It's a daily balancing act made harder by a government too divided to respond with effective policy. As political uncertainty lingers, it exacerbates the divide between the have and have-nots. Research shows that income inequality tends to grow in times of crisis when economic policies are frozen or delayed. Social cohesion, already strained, is unraveling further. Public trust in leaders has hit historically low levels, leaving many to wonder whether real solutions will ever come. For example, a recent poll indicated that 2/3 of French citizens believe their government is out of touch with the realities of their lives. It's not just a feeling, it's reinforced by visible frustrations like delayed infrastructure projects, public sector cuts, and the failure to address the skyrocketing cost of living. This political deadlock has also highlighted an unsettling byproduct. The disconnect is no longer just between citizens and officials, but also among various communities. The inability to pass meaningful reforms means that issues like unemployment fester, particularly in economically disadvantaged areas. As a result, tensions rise. In cities like Marseille and Lyon, where unemployment rates among young people surpass national averages, public discontent has become more visible. Urban hubs are seeing an uptick in clashes between frustrated residents as economic hardship feeds into broader social instability. One of the issues at the core of this political impasse is the lack of decisive leadership. While coalition governments are common in many democracies, they require collaboration and compromise, neither of which seems achievable at the moment in France. As debates drag on in Parliament, citizens pay the price. The slow response to unemployment, inflation, and rising public debt creates a sense of hopelessness for many. For instance, job seekers are finding it harder to access benefits as bureaucratic systems remain neglected amid budgetary standoffs. Younger generations, meanwhile, question what the future holds when even securing stable housing or employment is an uphill battle. The larger consequence of this gridlock isn't just financial, it's emotional. Many citizens describe feeling as if the country is stuck in a perpetual state of limbo. Imagine waking up each morning not knowing whether the train you rely on for work will be running or if your child's school will have enough teachers in classrooms. Now add the anxiety of rising prices and stagnant wages, and it's easy to see how this deadlock creates widespread disillusionment. Some residents, disheartened by the lack of progress, even consider leaving the country in search of stability elsewhere. Without effective leadership, these problems could become cyclical, leading to an even bleaker outlook. Political chaos isn't just about ideology, it trickles into every corner of daily life, making basic existence more difficult for millions of people. If decisions remain paralyzed, issues like inflation, unemployment, and economic inequality may only deepen, further eroding the foundation of French society. And yet, this is just one part of a much larger puzzle. Economic struggles, driven not only by political ineptitude, but also by systemic challenges, add another layer of complexity to life in France. The financial strain is suffocating, and it's here where the real tension boils over into everyday life. What does it look like when the cost of simply living becomes unbearable? Let's take a closer look. The financial squeeze: why France's cost of living feels unbearable. France may sound like the ultimate destination for a carefree lifestyle, but the reality for many residents looks far different. A growing number of people are struggling to make ends meet as the cost of living climbs steadily upward. Essentials like housing, food, and utilities are all getting more expensive, while wages struggle to keep pace. For some, this financial strain has turned daily life into a constant fight to stretch each euro. Take Paris, for example, the city everyone dreams about. Housing costs in the French capital paint a painfully clear picture of the problem. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the city center hovers around 1,044 euros, though many smaller, less central units can demand up to 2,000 euros or more. For that price, renters may find themselves stuck in cramped, sometimes windowless micro-apartments measuring less than 20 square meters with barely enough room to move around. And for those hoping to snag something larger or more affordable, they might face months-long wait lists due to the overwhelming demand for rental units. Families living in Paris are increasingly forced to reconsider whether the city is worth the financial burden at all. Some are packing up and leaving behind dreams of Parisian life, driven away by prohibitive costs. Even outside of housing, the financial challenges only continue. Everyday staples like food have seen significant price increases over the past few years. A single grocery trip now feels like an ongoing reminder of how inflation hits the average household. French staple items, from apples priced as high as €5.90 per kilogram to a simple baguette running anywhere between 75 cents and €3.75, are testing the limits of many budgets. And while €300 per month is a general estimate for what French households spend on food, it's important to note that this number excludes other essential purchases like hygiene products, cleaning supplies, and more. Month after month, these rising expenses chip away at anyone trying to maintain even a modest standard of living. Taxes aren't helping the situation either. French workers face some of the highest tax burdens in the European Union, with income taxes reaching up to 45% for top earners and mandatory social contributions eating up another 17% of gross income. Those who fall into the category of high-asset individuals have the added pressure of the country's wealth tax, which applies not only to luxury assets, but also to real estate valued over 1.3 million euros. Rates for this tax range between 0.5% and 1.5%, and combined with existing levies, it swallows a good chunk of disposable income. For expatriates hoping to enjoy what they imagined as a relaxed French lifestyle, these financial realities often come as a shock, sometimes even derailing their plans to settle in the country. The government has imposed austerity measures in an attempt to stabilize the economy, in part through the 2025 finance bill, which promises €60 billion in spending cuts and tax hikes aimed at reducing the public deficit to 5% of GDP. But these measures have been met with criticism, sparking concerns about whether the country is balancing its priorities on the backs of ordinary citizens. As part of these cuts, sectors like education have been hit hard, with over 4,000 teaching positions eliminated. Meanwhile, benefits for many social programs have been frozen or scaled back, leaving vulnerable groups without the safety nets they depend on. Critics of the plan worry that such spending cuts will only widen the gap between the wealthy and those struggling to keep up, aggravating the income divide that has already become a glaring feature of French society. For middle and lower income families, the rising cost of living highlights a grim reality. While expenses keep climbing, salaries remain frustratingly stagnant. The average monthly income in France after taxes is about 2,183 euros. On paper, that number might seem livable, until you consider that maintaining a modest monthly budget for a family of four costs over 3,300 euros, not including rent. Even for singles or couples without children, these financial gaps can feel insurmountable. Inflation, while showing signs of slowing compared to previous years, still adds pressure. Though it peaked at 7.0% in early 2023 and fell to 3% by 2024, the damage from years of rising prices lingers. Services inflation in particular keeps dragging household budgets further down as wages fail to rise quickly enough to offset these costs. These struggles aren't just numbers on a page, they've uprooted lives. A family in Lyon, for instance, recently shared how the price of living forced them to make significant compromises. They once hoped to buy a modest home in the suburbs, but soaring real estate prices made even that goal unattainable. Instead, they continue renting a small flat, gradually watching their savings erode with every passing year. Stories like these are increasingly common as working-class households exhaust every possible strategy to keep up with ballooning expenses. Expats who arrive bright-eyed and eager to embrace French culture often find themselves blindsided by rental deposits requiring thousands of euros up front or the shockingly high administrative fees just to file paperwork for residency. The government argues that these sacrifices are necessary for long-term economic stability, but many residents see things differently, fearing that these policies will only deepen the precariousness already felt across much of the country. Higher taxes paired with lower social benefits have left people questioning whether the trade-off is justified. Are these austerity policies paving the way for economic recovery, or are they plunging everyday citizens further into distress with no real end in sight? As everyday people shoulder more of the financial burden, the strain ripples out into other aspects of French life. Households are cutting back on extras like dining out or traveling within the country, shrinking the profits of local businesses. A once vibrant promise of French living now feels like a faded postcard, beautiful to look at, but detached from reality. And while economics is at the core of this problem, digging deeper reveals other cracks forming in France's social framework. Rising financial insecurity doesn't just impact wallets, it begins to erode communities. What happens when economic stress escalates into social unrest? Let's explore the growing social challenges intertwined with this financial squeeze. A fractured society, rising crime, immigration struggles, and social tensions. France's social fabric, long celebrated for its distinct blend of tradition and multiculturalism, is showing deep cracks. Social tensions, once simmering beneath the surface, have boiled over, exposing issues of poverty, rising crime, and immigration challenges that are reshaping communities. While these problems are most visible in France's urban centers, their ripple effects stretch across the entire country. And as economic hardships grow, the strain only intensifies. One of the most visible concerns is the rise in crime, particularly violent crime, in major cities. Areas like Marseille, Lyon, and even parts of Paris have seen increasing reports of youth violence, often linked to unemployment and poverty. Organized drug networks have taken hold in certain districts, sparking incidents of gang-related violence. In Limoges, city officials have even referred to some clashes as organized guerrilla warfare, reflecting just how serious the situation has become. In response, curfews have been imposed in high-crime zones, but their effectiveness is highly debated. Critics argue these measures only treat the symptoms of deeper societal problems, like inequality and lack of economic opportunity. Efforts to curb crime often fail to address how systemic issues create environments where violence can thrive. Immigration sits at the heart of an intensifying public debate about identity, integration, and fairness. France has long been a destination for migrants and asylum seekers searching for safety or opportunity. But for those arriving today, integration remains a monumental challenge. Language barriers, cultural differences, and discrimination often leave migrants feeling excluded. Xenophobic and anti-immigrant sentiment has risen in recent years, fueling public debates on whether tighter immigration controls are necessary. Racist and anti-religious crimes increased in number, particularly in 2022, reflecting the growing divisions within society. This trend erodes trust and ignites tensions in communities where coexistence used to feel more achievable. For many immigrants, daily life becomes a balancing act between surviving institutional barriers and navigating hostile social environments. Living conditions for a portion of the population further illustrate how fractured society has become. Housing is one of France's most urgent crises. nearly 4 million people are reportedly homeless or living in unsafe conditions. A staggering 350,000 are homeless outright, a dramatic jump from 143,000 in 2012, and street deaths have also surged, reaching record highs in 2024. Public housing initiatives designed to alleviate this burden are stretched to capacity. Waiting lists for subsidized apartments can last over a decade in some cities. This leaves many vulnerable people stuck in limbo, relying on overcrowded shelters or temporary housing that barely meets basic needs. Without significant investment in solving the housing crisis, the divide between those who have stable homes and those struggling to find shelter will likely continue to widen. Efforts to ease these crises face another major hurdle: the country's under-resourced public services. Unemployment and vocational programs, which should provide a safety net for struggling communities, are unable to keep up with demand. Job seekers, especially those from immigrant backgrounds, often confront waiting periods or incomplete support as they try to enter the workforce. Immigrants facing irregular legal statuses see even fewer options, excluded from many services altogether. The result is not just economic stagnation for countless families, but a rising sense of frustration and hopelessness that spills into public spaces, feeding discontent across cities. The rift between urban and rural communities adds another dimension to France's challenges. Urban centers like Marseille may battle crime and integration, but rural regions carry their own set of burdens, namely underinvestment and social neglect. Small towns and villages are watching as shops shutter, schools combine classes due to lack of funding, and population numbers dwindle. Basic infrastructure like transportation and healthcare falls behind, forcing those in rural areas to travel farther for essential services. This urban-rural divide creates starkly different realities across the country, yet both feel left behind in their own ways. Rural residents resent a lack of attention, while urban communities see their skyrocketing population density create unbearable strain on resources. Public protests have become a near constant backdrop to this wider picture of social tension. Beyond demonstrations over pensions and wages, the streets now host furious debates on immigration laws, housing shortages, and crime. France's proud tradition of civic engagement seems strained under the weight of so many overlapping frustrations. People march for different reasons, but share a unifying sentiment: the sense that leaders are failing to respond to real, pressing needs. This dissatisfaction feeds a cycle of mistrust, where political promises rarely lead to action, fueling skepticism about whether any progress can be made. With tensions rising on so many fronts, the question remains: what happens when a society's various fractures meet? On one hand, there's the risk that aggravations, economic, cultural, and social, will compound until certain communities feel entirely disconnected from the rest of French life. On the other, these divisions could fuel a greater push for unifying solutions, though that would demand significant action and collaboration from a politically gridlocked system. The social challenges France faces aren't isolated. They connect directly to the economic instability caused by rising costs, unemployment, and austerity. Yet without addressing the root causes, these challenges will only deepen over time, creating a feedback loop of eroding trust and growing unrest. France is struggling to answer fundamental questions about identity, fairness, and opportunity, questions deeply rooted in its history, but especially pressing in its current climate. Is there still room for harmony in a country divided by so many lines? Or has the persistent strain irreversibly worn down the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity that once defined the French dream? As the cracks deepen, hope for recovery rests on rebuilding trust, not just among individuals, but in the institutions meant to serve them. On a final note, for generations, the French dream symbolized a life of beauty, balance, and possibility. But for many today, that vision feels distant, weighed down by economic pressure, political failures, and social divides. Can France find its way back to prosperity and harmony, or are these challenges rewriting its story entirely? The road ahead depends on bold leadership, meaningful reform, and a renewed focus on unity. A daunting but essential path forward. What do you think? Can the values of liberty, equality, and fraternity still thrive in today's France? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation about the future.